You know that feeling, don't you? When someone with an avoidant attachment style has taken up permanent residence in your mind, you're replaying conversations, analyzing their mixed signals, wondering if they're thinking about you too. It feels one-sided, doesn't it? Like you're the only one caught in this emotional storm while they're off living their best, unbothered life. But here's what most people don't realize. If an avoidant is constantly on your mind, they are not unaffected. In fact, there are very specific psychological and emotional dynamics already playing out beneath their composed exterior. And today, we're pulling back the curtain on exactly what's happening to them when you can't stop thinking about them. This isn't about blame. It's not about right or wrong. This is about understanding the hidden mechanics of avoidant attachment and what your persistent thoughts about them actually reveal about the connection you share. So if you're ready to understand what's really going on behind their walls, let's dive in. Here's the paradox of loving an avoidant. The more they feel connected to you, the more their nervous system sounds the alarm. And if you're constantly thinking about them, the chances are you've already penetrated their carefully constructed emotional fortress deeper than most ever do. Think about it. Avoidants don't give their mental real estate to just anyone. Their entire attachment strategy is built on self-reliance and emotional distance. So when someone manages to occupy their thoughts, even subconsciously, it triggers something primal in them, fear of engulfment. They start noticing themselves thinking about you, checking their phone, wondering what you're doing. And immediately, their nervous system interprets this as danger. The internal alarm bells start ringing with warnings like, I'm becoming too dependent, I'm losing myself, I need space. What makes this dynamic so confusing is that avoidants are experts at masking their internal experience. On the surface, they might appear completely fine, even indifferent. But internally, there's a war happening. Their autonomic nervous system is registering your presence in their life as a potential threat to their sense of self. This isn't conscious or intentional. It's a deeply ingrained survival mechanism that formed early in their childhood. The cruel irony, the reason you're thinking about them all the time is likely because they've been pulling away, which is actually their defense mechanism kicking in because you matter to them. Your obsessive thoughts and their distancing behavior are two sides of the same coin. You're responding to their withdrawal, and they're withdrawing because they're responding to their own feelings. This creates a toxic cycle where the more you think about them, the more you might pursue connection, which makes them retreat further, which makes you think about them even more intensely. Your inability to get them out of your head often means they're already struggling with how much you've gotten into theirs, and the nervous system is working overtime to restore what it perceives as necessary emotional distance. Avoidants live with a constant internal war, and when you're on their mind, whether they admit it or not, that war intensifies to almost unbearable levels. Here's what's happening on one level. They're feeling something real. Connection, attraction, maybe even love. These are genuine emotions that arise naturally when two people share chemistry and compatibility. But their core beliefs about relationships are screaming the opposite narrative. Intimacy is suffocating. People always want too much. I'm better off alone. Relationships take away my freedom. This creates massive cognitive dissonance, which is one of the most uncomfortable psychological states a person can experience. The human brain desperately seeks consistency between beliefs and reality. And when there's a mismatch, it causes significant distress. And guess what happens when people experience cognitive dissonance? They resolve it by reinforcing their existing beliefs, not by updating them. So they'll start rewriting the narrative in their minds. I don't actually miss them that much. They're probably too needy anyway. I'm just romanticizing this. The connection wasn't that special. They'll minimize what you shared together, downplay their feelings, and convince themselves that distance is the rational, mature choice. But here's the tells. The fact that they need to convince themselves of anything means the feelings are real and significant. You don't have to rationalize away something that doesn't matter. If someone truly doesn't care, they don't spend mental energy justifying why they don't care. The very existence of this internal dialogue proves the opposite. If you're thinking about them constantly, it's often because you're sensing this internal battle they're fighting. Your nervous system, which is incredibly intuitive, picks up on their ambivalence, even when they're not expressing it directly. You can feel the push and pull, the hot and cold, the mixed signals, and it keeps you hooked, endlessly trying to decode what's really going on beneath the surface. This cognitive dissonance they're experiencing is exhausting for them, even if they'd never admit it, and it's the source of much of their confusing behavior. Here's a behavior pattern most people miss. Avoidance tests you without even realizing they're doing it, and these tests are happening constantly throughout the relationship. When you're constantly on their mind, it creates anxiety because it conflicts with their fundamental need for independence. So what do? They pull back, they become inconsistent in their communication. They send mixed signals that leave you confused and off balance, not because they're consciously playing games or trying to manipulate you, but because they're unconsciously trying to answer a question that haunts them. Will this person abandon me if I'm not perfect, if I show my real self, if I need space, if I'm not available emotionally? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy in the making, and it's tragic to watch unfold. Their deepest fear is abandonment, despite appearing so independent and self-sufficient, but their attachment style makes them behave in ways that actively push people away. Then when you finally leave, exhausted by the inconsistency, it confirms their belief. See, people always leave. I was right not to trust this. I was right to keep my walls up. But here's what's happening beneath the surface that changes everything. Every time they push and you don't leave, it chips away at their worldview. Every time they withdraw and you remain steady, not chasing desperately, but simply present and grounded in your own worth, you're providing evidence that contradicts their entire attachment narrative. This is incredibly powerful, though the process is slow. If you're obsessing over them, you're likely caught in this push-pull cycle right now, and while it feels torturous for you, understand that they're not doing it intentionally. Their nervous system is literally testing the safety of the connection in the only way it knows how. The person who can pass this test isn't the one who chases harder, texts more, or tries to prove their love through pursuit. It's the one who maintains their own center, their own life, their own sense of self while remaining open and available when the avoidant is ready to connect. That's what actually makes an avoidant stop and think, wait, this person isn't like the others. They're not suffocating me, but they're also not abandoning me. Oh, this one's fascinating and something most people completely miss. You think they're off living their independent life, completely unbothered by your absence. Think again, because the reality is very different. Avoidants are masters of covert monitoring, and they've perfected this skill to an art form. They'll claim they need space. They'll go silent for days or even weeks, but behind the scenes, they're checking your social media. They're noticing when you post something new. They're paying attention to who you're with in photos. They're wondering if you've moved on, if you're dating someone else, if you're still thinking about them. They just won't tell you about any of this, and they'll barely admit it to themselves because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging that they care, which threatens their entire identity. See, avoidants crave connection just as much as anyone else. This is a crucial point that people misunderstand. They've just learned to get it through observation rather than participation. It's safer that way. They can feel connected to you, feel like they know what's happening in your life without the vulnerability of actual engagement or direct communication. If you're constantly thinking about them, there's a good chance they're doing their own version of the same thing, just in a more covert way. The difference, you're probably more obvious about it. You might reach out, try to reconnect, show your cards, express your feelings. Meanwhile, they're running a sophisticated background surveillance operation that would make a private investigator proud. This is why when you finally start pulling back, when you stop reaching out, when you genuinely move on and start living your life fully, that's often when they suddenly reappear out of nowhere, because their monitoring system detected a shift in the dynamic. Something changed. You're not as available anymore. And suddenly they're the ones feeling anxious. They're the ones wondering what you're doing. They're the ones feeling the discomfort of potential loss. Just because they're not reaching out doesn't mean you're not on their mind. And this is something you need to understand deeply to maintain your sanity. There's a phenomenon in attachment psychology called Phantom X syndrome, and it's particularly relevant to avoidance and explains so much of their confusing behavior. Here's how it works when an avoidant is in a relationship or close connection with someone. They focus disproportionately on all the negatives. The person's flaws become magnified in their mind. Small quirks become major incompatibilities. The relationship feels suffocating, demanding, overwhelming. They convince themselves they'd be happier alone. that they made a mistake getting involved, that this person just isn't right for them. So they leave or create emotional distance to protect themselves from what feels like impending engulfment. But then, and this is where it gets interesting, something shifts once there's actual distance. Once the perceived threat is gone, once they're back in their comfort zone of independence, suddenly all the positives come flooding back with surprising intensity. They remember the good times with crystal clarity. They miss the connection they had. That person starts to seem perfect in retrospect, and they wonder if they made a terrible mistake. Now, here's the twist that applies to your situation. This can happen even before a formal breakup or ending. If you're constantly thinking about an avoidant, it might be because they're in that in-between space, physically present but emotionally distant. And they're already experiencing a version of this phenomenon in real time. They're simultaneously pushing you away because you feel too close, and starting to idealize you because part of them recognizes what they're losing. Part of them wants to run to safety. Part of them knows they're losing something valuable and rare. This internal tug of war makes them unpredictable, confusing, and absolutely maddening to deal with from the outside. And guess what? Your constant thoughts about them are likely your intuition picking up on this ambivalence that they're broadcasting, even if they're not saying it in words. You can sense that they're not fully in, but also not fully out. So your mind stays hooked, trying to solve the puzzle, trying to figure out what's real and what's not. They're caught between deactivation and recognition, between their attachment programming and their genuine feelings. And until they resolve that internal conflict, they'll keep you trapped in the same limbo they're living in. Here's the final mind-bending truth that reveals the tragic irony of the entire dynamic. The very strategies avoidance used to maintain independence actually create the clingy, obsessive, anxious behavior they're trying to avoid in the first place. Think about it logically for a moment. When someone is consistent, available, and emotionally present in your life, you don't obsess over them. You feel secure in the connection. You can relax. You can focus on other areas of your life. You trust that they'll be there, so you don't need to constantly monitor or worry. But when someone is hot and cold, when they're affectionate and available one day and distant and withdrawn the next, when they make you feel like you're the most special person in their world and then disappear without explanation, your brain goes into absolute overdrive. You become hypervigilant, constantly scanning for signs of where you stand. You analyze every text message, looking for hidden meanings. You replay every conversation, searching for clues about their true feelings. You can't stop thinking about them because your nervous system is trying to solve the threat, asking, is this person safe? Can I trust this connection? Am I about to be abandoned? So the avoidance worst fear, the nightmare scenario they're constantly trying to prevent, which is this person is going to become too attached, too needy, too demanding, and they're going to suffocate me, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Their inconsistency and emotional unavailability creates the exact anxious attachment response they're trying to escape. And deep down on some level, they know this. They might not articulate it consciously. They might not have the psychological vocabulary to explain it, but they sense that their behavior is creating the very dynamic they hate. And that awareness creates guilt, confusion, sometimes even self-loathing. They know they're hurting someone who cares about them, but they feel powerless to change because their nervous system is running the show. If you're constantly thinking about an avoidant, understand this fundamental truth. You're not crazy, you're not broken, you're not too needy. Your nervous system is responding rationally to an irrational situation, and they're dealing with the consequences of their own attachment wounds, just like you are trapped in patterns that were formed long before you ever met. Here's the thing most people don't realize, and it's actually hopeful. Avoidants don't change because you chase them. They change because you stop. If an avoidant is constantly on your mind, you're likely still in pursuit mode right now, trying to understand them, trying to get through to them, trying to make them see what you have together, trying to prove your worth. And while that's completely understandable and comes from a place of genuine love, it's also exactly what keeps them stuck in their pattern. Your pursuit confirms their fear that people are demanding and relationships are suffocating. But something powerful happens when you step back, not out of manipulation or game playing, but out of genuine self-respect and self-love. When you stop making them the center of your universe, when you rebuild your own life, reconnect with friends, pursue your passions, rediscover your worth. When you show them through your actions, not your words, that you're not going to tolerate breadcrumbs or inconsistent treatment, that's when their nervous system finally has space to process what they actually feel without the pressure, without the pursuit, without the perceived threat. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, that's when they start to realize what they've been running from. They might reach out with a new level of vulnerability. They might start doing their own healing work, maybe therapy or reading about attachment. They might finally be ready to show up differently because they've had to face the reality of losing you. Or they might not, and that's okay too, because by that point you'll have already reclaimed your peace and remembered who you are outside of this dynamic. If you're thinking about an avoidant all the time, it's a sign that you've given them too much power over your emotional state. And the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself is to take that power back. The version of you that stops obsessing, that focuses on your own healing and growth, is the same version that becomes truly attractive to an avoidant, because you're no longer needing them. You're choosing them from a place of wholeness. And if they don't respond to that version of you, then they were never your person to begin with. And you've just saved yourself years of trying to earn love from someone who isn't capable of giving it yet.